Today, we're going to talk about all the accessories that you can add on to your machine after you buy it. Hi, I'm Cathy, and this is Sewing Tech Talk. Why? Why doesn't a manufacturer add everything that you need when you get your machine? Why is there extra stuff after you get machine? Why? For me? Thank you. I want to accept this award, the irony, from the Sewing Academy for overacting in a sewing video. I want to thank all the little people that made this possible. Tiny, my agent, Shorty, my manager. Thank you, thing. Thank you. So a manufacturer doesn't include everything because it might not make sense for how you sew. So for example, you may be getting this machine mostly for embroidery. And so this is all cool sewing accessories. Maybe it doesn't apply to you. So if they included this big giant sewing extension table, that would be great. But if you have to sew in a little space, it doesn't work for you. You can get this table in 4 different sizes, so you can adopt the size that works for you. This is a sewing multifunction foot control. So you can use it for, and we're going to use it today for all kinds of fun little functions on the machines to keep your hands on the work. That's great. You don't need it for embroidery. So it's a sewing accessory. Extra feet for sewing. So we're going to talk about all of this extra little stuff. We're going to talk about this sewing extension table. You can, by the way, get it with a grid that helps you do a 1/4 inch or helps you with free motion. You can get it with a circle sewing tool. It even comes with an extra tray if that's what you choose. So you can go to the description after the video. I've written down all the options for the stuff I'm going to be talking about today. It's all cool stuff, but you need to figure out what works for you and your sewing adventure. So go to the description. It's usually highlighted in blue. Click on that. It takes you to the landing page, and there you can download the handout and check out what you need. Now, the cool thing also about this video today is we're going to have a giveaway. So go to that same place where you get your handout, and every time you like or comment or share, you're entered for a chance to win this cool thread pack. So go there and like, comment, share, and while you're there, why don't you subscribe? Because hopefully you want to come back and see me get another acting award. So let me talk a little bit about this Sew Steady table. It's the first thing. I'm going to take it away after we talk about it because it's a little big for my sewing space right here. But you can get this giant table. This is the Sew Steady table, and it fits on the bed of your machine. You take off the accessory box and put this table on. You can get it, like I said, with a overlay, which helps you. You can use it for measuring. You can use it for free motion to help you glide the fabric over the top of it. It even has guidelines to help you ramp on up and get that perfect 1/4 inch seam. You can even get it with a circle sewing tool, or depending on the size that you get, you can get it with this accessory tray. The important thing is it doubles your sewing space. So whatever size you do get or can fit in your sewing space, you have this space here which makes your sewing so much easier and more professional, but you have this area right here where all your accessories are right at your fingertips. So this is a great option. We also can get, for this machine and many other models, this is a multifunction foot control. What does it do? Well, if you press on it like you do a normal foot pedal, it makes the machine go. But you can do a heel tap on this and you can get 4 other functions out of it. By tapping your heel, you can make a single stitch, you can make the needle go up and down, You can do the cutter, which is great, and you can have the machine go in reverse. So there's different applications for each one of those options that you can do, and you can set it up in the settings of the machine for what you're depending on what you're sewing. And I list all those in the handout. We're also going to talk about 5 of the most common extra feet, plus we're going to talk about the walking foot as well. So let me get everything set up here. We're going to set it up for using the feet, and I'll be right back. So let's start with a couple of feet. This is the stitch in the ditch foot and the edge joining foot. Now these feet look very similar, and they're kind of built very similar. They both have this little guide, this little metal guide that comes down the middle of the front of the foot. This one's longer in the stitch in the ditch foot. This one's a little bit shorter in the edge joining foot. They both serve similar functions, but they excel at certain jobs better one than the other. We're going to start with the edge joining foot. We'll put the stitch in the ditch foot down for a second. Now I'm going to snap it on. I made this little tree skirt out of leftover blocks that I had, and in fact I used that circle sewing tool on that big table. So I got a perfect circle. But I thought I'd put some extra decorative stitches right over the top of the seam. Now I want to keep that decorative stitch centered, and so that guide is going to help me, because I'm going to run as I stitch. I'm going to keep that seam right along that guide. Now I've attached my multi-purpose function foot control. I've plugged it in, just plugs in like your other regular foot control plugs in. And in the settings, I've gone to the settings, and I've gone to the second page, and I've chosen it to do a single stitch. Because sometimes when I'm turning the corner with this decorative stitch, just one extra stitch gets me in that perfect spot. That's okay. Now I've also set up the machine because I'm going to be turning a corner with the pivot function. Now what that does is when you stop sewing, the needle stays down, but the foot automatically raises up. And it does that with that multifunction foot control. So as you can see, I can keep all hands on deck and just control everything with my foot, and not have to take my hands off, and it works really, really well. So let's get this on here. Let's lower our foot, and we're going to start to sew all the way up to that corner. Now I'm pretty close, and notice the foot raised up for me, but when I turn around, I think I need that extra stitch. So all I have to do is rock my heel back, and the machine's going to take one extra complete stitch for me. And if that works, great. I think I need one more. Easy peasy, and I just turn my work around. That guide's going to land up exactly right in that same spot again, and I just continue on to sew. So this could be used on a project like this, but if you're making a garment and want to do extra stitching on the seams, it works really well for that. Now this foot is the edge joining foot, and it works beautifully for joining two pieces together, because that's what it was made for. So for example, maybe you have some smaller pieces of batting, maybe not this small, but maybe you want to join some batting together to make one big piece without having to buy a whole extra batting. So I'm going to join these two battings together, but I want to change my multifunction foot control, not for a single stitch, but for cutting. So I go into the settings, I go to the second page, and right now it says single stitch. I just go to the selection where it says thread cutting. Okay, now when I rock my heel back, it's going to automatically trim my thread. So let's put these two pieces on either side. I don't think I need that pivot function anymore, and we're going to adjust this so that it's right in the middle, and away we go. Now I kept that same serpentine stitch, but there's other stitches that are built into the machine that work great for this. So I'm going to go to stitch on this machine, stitch 1024, And that's a stitch specifically for either putting down a tape or joining two pieces together. Now remember, on this machine, what you see is what you get. So I think I want it a little bit wider. I'm going to go to the settings, make that stitch a little bit wider, and maybe a little bit longer. And I think this might even be superior for joining my batting. Remember, click your heel, just like, who was that? That was the Wizard of Oz, wasn't it? And, oh my gosh, that is beautifully done. That perfectly joins my batting together. So you can see that you can program the machine to do exactly what you want it to do. Now, what us quilters, and I'm a big time quilter, what we like to do a lot is when we don't want our stitching to show on the front of our quilt, we like to do what's called stitch in the ditch. So I'm going to go back to just a straight stitch, and I like my quilting stitch to be just a little bit longer. So I'm going to increase the length just a little bit. Remember, I didn't put any settings into your handout. You might want to jot down what I'm doing, but your settings might be a little bit different. You might like it to be a different stitch, a different setting. You find what works for you. So let's stitch in the ditch. I'm going to change over to that stitch in the ditch foot. Remember, that's the one with a slightly longer tongue in the middle, or guide. It has a little bit longer guide, and that's going to help me ramp on into that ditch. They snap on easy, and I'm going to stitch right in that ditch, but I'm going to have to do one more setting, and let me tell you what that is. Let me get my quilt under there and I will tell you. So this guide is going to go right down the middle of my seam. Now my seam, because it's a quilt, has been pressed to the one side. When we stitch in the ditch, one side's going to be higher and one side's going to be lower, and that ditch is that sweet little valley that's right in the middle. I want to stitch right in that. I don't want to stitch on the hill because you will see it. So this machine has another setting that's really useful. It's called left-right shift. And in this stitch, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the needle over just a hair to the left because my seam is on the right. If my seam was on the right, I'd move it a hair over to the left. Whatever. You figure out what direction I'm going. So I'm going to put it in that little valley. So here we go. I've moved my needle over just a little bit, and let's see what it looks like. Click my heel if I want to cut my thread, and oh my goodness, I hit right into that valley. So you just can't see my stitch. It works out really, really well. So with the conjunction with the settings of the machine and the feet, you can get really, really good results without a lot of stress and hassle. So I'm going to go on. We're going to change over now. Let me grab a couple other samples. I'm going to do some home decor. Let's do some piping like you would use around a pillow or whatever you want to put a piping on. It really accents it great. So let me put this quilt away, and we're going to go over to a couple more feet. Now, cording adds that special touch to home decor when you're making pillows, anytime you want to accent a seam. Now the machine comes with a zipper foot, which is great for sewing on zippers, and you can use it for sewing next to something that's not very tall. It comes with this adjustable zipper foot, which means that you can adjust it and you can sew next to something that's kind of tall and thick and big like a piping, but really it's not a lot of contact with the feed dogs. So this one is not tall enough, and this one doesn't give you a lot of control. The piping foot, however, has two channels on the very bottom of it, and what this does is it snugs over the top of the piping and holds it in place securely, so that when you stitch it down, when you're creating it or when you're stitching it down, it really gives you control. So it snaps on, And you're better off if you create your piping ahead of time before you attach it. So I've gone ahead and I've created this little piece of piping. I went ahead and I put the piping on in there, and I selected my stitch length, my stitch position rather, so that it wasn't really super close to that cording. And I went ahead and created my piping ahead of time. Now, it's actually easier to create your piping ahead of time than try to do it when you're stitching it to your project, because sometimes it's easier to do it twice than it is to do it in one fell swoop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach this to the edge of my little project here. I'm going to lay it right along the side, and that foot fits and snuggies right down on that piping. Now I'm going to turn the corner, which is pretty simple because this foot will hold the position of the piping in place. One thing I am going to do, however, is I'm going to take and I'm going to, instead of leaving my needle right in the exact center position, I am going to move it over to the right a little bit with my left-right shift so it's not dead center. Gives that piping some area to move around in. Now when I get to the very corner, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my trusty scissors and I'm going to snip right on into where that corner turn is going to be. So I'm going to stitch right on up to that. Stop, raise my feed dogs, turn my piping around and fit that piping right back into that same groove, and then I continue on. So it helps me turn that corner by really controlling that piping and not let it scoot around. And it turned out pretty good. So the piping foot is great, and it's really essential for doing your piping. But I want to move on and talk about a couple other feet that sometimes get confused. Let's talk about the walking foot and the roller foot. Take our piping foot off. Now, the walking foot, a lot of quilters already know about. This is the foot that you use when you're working on a quilt, and you don't want it to scoot. I'm going to talk about why that happens in a little bit. But not many people know about the roller foot. The roller foot is also for stitching on fabrics that are kind of sticky, something that's not going to pass under the needle very well. What's the difference between the two? Well, the walking foot hops like a little bunny. What it does is it moves up and down as this little attachment goes over the needle bar. It goes up and down. So it releases pressure as you're sewing. So when the feed dogs are working to pull the fabric or garment or quilt forward, pressure's released, so hopefully everything comes forward at the same time. It would be ideal, especially in a quilt, if the foot just disappeared and everything just pulled on forward. But wait, that's what a long arm does. So it's the best we can do with a domestic machine. A walking foot is great for that. It releases pressure as the item goes through. You'd think that would be great for sticky fabrics as well. But it's really not, because you want to maintain control of that item as that item is being stitched. And that's what the roller foot does. The roller foot has little rollers on the bottom and on the back. And literally it works like a little car, and the item slides or glides underneath it, but it always maintains pressure on the item so that everything feeds beautifully, smoothly, doesn't get kind of squirrely on you. So let's put the roller foot on and see what it's good for stitching for. Now let's go to our regular straight stitch, and I'm going to be okay with this, but let's put that needle back in that center position. So this is something I hear a lot of people use the walking foot for, which is that minky or cuddle. It's that stretchy, fluffy, really fun stuff. Now when you sew it, it wants to scoot and move on you. But with the roller foot, what happens is you can maintain pressure on it. It's not going to go south on you, and it's going to slide right underneath, and it just sews beautifully. And at the very end, it comes out even. So what else is it good for? Say you have something like this vinyl cloth or that polyurethane backed waterproof fabric, something that's sticky, vinyl. If anything has like a stick to it, the roller foot's going to allow it to pass beautifully underneath. So for example, leather. Leather is an item that can get kind of sticky under the needle, and a walking foot a lot of times leaves a mark when those top grabbers come down on it. But with a roller foot, it really just stitches beautifully. It rolls right on underneath, just like I was sewing regular cotton. So the roller foot sometimes can be used in place when you think you might use a walking foot. Now, when is a roller foot not good? Basically, when you want pressure to be released on the item that you're stitching. For example, a quilt. So let's change over to the walking foot because it's a special process. I'm going to take my screwdriver. This is not a foot that snaps on. Now, it has to be attached specially because you have this little arm that needs to go over the needle clamp. In your handout, there's a picture of where exactly it goes. Now, when you get your walking foot, it may not look like mine. I did this as a joke to myself because a walking foot doesn't like to stitch really super fast. It likes to be medium to slow, to do its thing. It's a mechanical foot. I made a joke of putting the flame on there with my scan and cut to remind me that I really should sew a little bit slower with my walking foot. So let's put it on. I'm going to snap off my roller foot, undo the ankle, and now I'm going to put this clamp over that needle bar, come in from the rear here and jiggle it on. I might have to loosen the screw just a little bit. When I get everything on, I'm certainly going to tighten it up because it needs to be secure because it has a mechanical action and I don't want it to come loose. Now, let's sew something. I have this scarf. It's fur. It's a nice little fur piece and it's kind of on the thicker side. So when I sew it, I want to probably release pressure up as I'm sewing and finish it on off with that seam because it's a little bit thicker. Let's see what happens. You can see how the walking foot moves up and down. It's kind of like a little bunny that's hopping down there as I go, oh, I forgot. Heel tap to clip my thread. And it worked beautifully. Now, if it had gone squirrely on me, I could do this same process with that roller foot. So you decide with your particular project what works and what doesn't. You choose. You know, there's two kinds of sewers. The kind of sewers that do a sample and the kind of sewers that wish they had done a sample. So let's move on to our final foot of the day. Ta-da! This is something that's pretty cool. This is the gathering foot, and it also is a foot that you put on the it's not a snap-on foot. You're going to put it on the ankle just like you did the walking foot, and it's pretty neat because it can gather a piece, which is great, but it can gather a piece and sew it to the flat piece at the same time. So let's take off our walking foot. And we're going to insert our gathering foot on that same ankle. Remember, it's not a snap-on. And it looks a little different than your traditional foot. And once again, I'm going to tighten it pretty securely. Now, I have a piece of regular fabric, and I have my ruffle here. With this foot, and this is all in your handout, the gathering foot, what's underneath the foot will gather. What I put in the little slot of the foot will not gather, but I need to adjust my stitch to gather. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick that same straight stitch, but I'm going to go to my settings. Now I want the width to stay the same. I want it to be, no, I want the width to be all the way to the left. So I'm going to move it all the way to the left. I almost forgot. And I want the length of the stitch to be long because it gabs more as it goes. Here's another setting that you may not mess with very much, but I want the tension on that top thread to be increased. I'm going to go up. Now, I can't tell you what setting because it depends on your fabric. A lighter weight fabric, this is just a plain muslin, will gather better. So I'm going to say okay. Remember, left needle position, higher tension, longer stitch. I'm going to put my fabric underneath the foot. Now I'm going to take just a couple stitches just to hold that in there. And I'm going to take my piece that I'm going to gather, put it right side down in the slot of that foot, and I'm going to put it all the way to the right. And I'm going to take a couple stitches to grab that on in. Now here's the trick. You want to sew it without pulling back on either of those. So I'm going to hold it gently, I'm going to guide it on in, and it's going to automatically gather that bottom fabric as I sew that top fabric. And you can see it works pretty good. So oops, heel click, cut my thread, and what it did is it gathered that bottom fabric and let the top fabric be absolutely flat. That's pretty great. So feet can help you do all kinds of sewing functions that may have taken a couple extra passes before. They help you guide the fabric in such a way, or guide the a part that you're attaching to the fabric, so that it makes it easier and simpler. A foot control that lets you keep all hands on deck. Sometimes you just have to have that extra little bit of control. A big sewing area, sometimes invaluable if you have a limited sewing space, you want to have a double. So accessories can make your machine so much better. And we've only talked about the sewing ones. There's embroidery accessories also. So look at the handout, see if there's anything in there that might help you. If you don't have this machine, there might be something there that works for your machine. You might want to check it out. So that's really all I got to say for now about accessories that can make your sewing that much better. So let's turn it over to George because I think I'm running out of voice.
Thanks, Cathy. That is an amazing machine. The Brother Innovus NQ3600D is not only an amazing sewing and quilting machine with 291 built-in stitches, and as you showed, there are stitches that are very, very large that sew in all different directions. It even has a basting stitch. I think my favorite feature is the fact that it automatically adjusts to the different fabric height. This way you can sew from heavy to light to even synthetic fabrics with ease. But also the full featured embroidery machine with that large 6 by 10 inch hoop and Disney designs. It actually has 233 built-in embroidery designs, and 35 of them are Disney. So this incredible machine now is available nationwide. Brother just gave us the authority so we can ship this across the country, and we're not charging for shipping. If you live in Alaska or Hawaii, there'll be a slight charge, but it'll be very reasonable. So right now, this machine is on sale. This machine has a regular retail price of $49.99, and it's worth that. But right now, it's on sale for $34.99, and we have it where we have interest-free payments for $146 a month, interest-free. Remember, we're not charging for shipping, and that's across the country. But wait, there's a bonus. For the first few to purchase this, you will get this exclusive Disney thread collection. This has 24 of the most popular colors that you can use for your built-in Disney designs. This is a $125 value, free as a gift from us. So click on the link to order or call us at 1-800-865-9664. Leave your name, number, and where you live, and I will have the staff member that is most qualified to help you with your sewing needs. Bye for now.